Sometimes, exploring means investigating mysteries which might not be made of stone. I'm author and researcher Mike Luoma. Coming across odd-looking earthworks in the University of Vermont's Jericho Research Forest led me to look it up on LIDAR, on the state's interactive map. There was a grid on the hill in the forest. LIDAR, laser imaging detection and ranging, uses airborne lasers and GPS positioning to map the ground below, giving us a glimpse of the terrain where it looks like all the trees and vegetation has been removed, as if we were looking at bare ground. So what was up with this grid? The southeast or lower left-hand corner is up on the hill, and it stands out. This is what I came across before I knew there was anything here. It was kind of difficult to capture the size and shape of this earthwork on video. I'm not sure how much you can see of its shape, even when I zoom out. UVM's forest manager, Jess Weichel, answered my questions about the grid via email and sent me some interesting photos. This 1937 aerial photo of the region features the hill and its grid. Jess, the forest manager, pointed out that the white isn't snow, it's sand. She shared a little of the history here. Due to soil damage, the hill was abandoned as a farm in the 1930s, after seeing heavy agricultural use for row crops, orchards, and some small animals since the 1790s. UVM got the property in a land swap in the late 1930s, when it was described as sand blows and sand dunes. This photo is from between 1939 and 1941. Some of this hill was underwater towards the end of the Ice Age, surrounded by the descending waters of glacial lakes Nashville, Mansfield, and Vermont. Part of the reason the hill is so sandy is that it was once a beach. When I mentioned the hill rising above the glacial lakes, forest manager Jess Weichel said the forest soil maps, though sometimes incorrect, showed there were glacial till soils and not lake sediment on the hilltop, and mentioned tentative plans to dig test pits to ground truth the soil maps. Between 1939 and 1941, they began planting conifers to stabilize the soil on the hill. This planting schematic, designed in concert with the 1939 Soil Conservation Service report, shows the efforts at that time to rehabilitate the land. It matches the location of the grid, though the grid itself seems to predate it based on the aerial photos. Down in the northwest corner, the upper left on a map, the ridges are huge. Jess, the forest manager, told me she'd dug a small soil pit in one of the grid's ridges and found it to just contain soil. She wondered if the mounded area of the grids was some combination of sand and soil that blew against the brush fences, plus decomposing material. I wondered if there could be stones beneath the mounds, given how they show up on the LIDAR. As Jess Weichel said, much of the other oddness on this hillside is likely also related to severe soil disturbance caused by farming. Not all of the hill saw such heavy use. She also said that some of the wooded areas that can be seen in the old aerial photo could have been farm woodlots that were never fully cleared but used regularly for timber. Stonework in these areas may not have any link to agricultural activity. Which is interesting, considering I did find a curious stone pile in one of those wooded areas. Could this be a stone prayer? As I don't disturb what I find, I try to puzzle this out through observation. The longer I look, the more interesting things I see. Could this be a turtle mound? Large stones on either end could be the head or tail of a turtle. With the mystery of the grid apparently solved, it was good to find something more like the ancient stone mysteries I usually seek out. Other stones circled the hill's summit on the non-grid side. This looks like it could be a split stone, which could be significant. Some curious flat stones here as well. These are all near a vernal pool among the pines, near the hilltop. The pool seemed some sign of soil retention success. There is a huge gully carved out by eroding rains that runs down the southeastern slope of the hill. The only actual stonework I found on the hill was at the base of the gully. What looked like the remnants of a gateway or a doorway. Jess, the forest manager, said she'd assumed the stonework was somehow related to water control coming out of the gully above it, like a mini dam or structure to slow water flow. But she admitted that was her wild guess based on the conditions there. I noted a square recess behind the stones and thought it could have been a spring house before the gully opened up behind it and washed it out. Or some other sort of small structure. Or the entrance to a staircase once cut into the hillside. Strangely enough, I found a number of glacial erratics along a sort of shelf midway up the western side of the hill, which is pretty steep. The bedrock seems to break off in long spalls on this side, judging by the damage this old tree has done. So the shelf could be natural. But one of the boulders, really two because it's split, looked to me like a possible fish effigy. Both the tail and the front look shaped, to me, in ways I've seen stone shaped before. But my assessment would likely not be shared by some as it goes against current consensus. but I base my assessment on repeated designs. I called this a possible fish effigy because I've seen these shapes on other boulders and stones, which also seem to be somewhat aquatic representations. For one example, this triangular shape here, we also seem to see here. And this is on King Philip Rock in Berlin, Massachusetts, about 200 miles south. I'm guessing this is the fin of a fish, but I could easily be mistaken. Still, it is a repeated pattern, a repeated design. When we come up and around, we see the split of the stone. Split stones often held spiritual significance for indigenous peoples in the northeast of what's now North America. Following the shelf, almost terrace of a sort, leads to several other curious stones. This one, with its curves and shelves, was worth a walk around. This is what that terrace's or natural shelves northern end looks like. UVM's Jericho Research Forest extends down to the south and west from the area around the hill. And on return visits, I've made my way down and around some pretty old trails, not all well used anymore. Found one somewhat interesting stone in the lower section. Could this stone have been perched? Placed here deliberately? The ridge on the way from the hill down to the southwestern section showed some very interesting, speculative stonework, including a perched, wing-shaped stone. Though not in an alcove, this is at the height I've found what I've termed perched wing-shaped stones in alcoves, which could date back to the glacial lakes. My video from last year on the St. Albans Town Forest has more about that wing-shaped stone form. This wing-shaped stone first caught my eye as a possible stood-up stone, as I saw it side-on from a distance. I believe this wing-shaped stone was perched in place here with these other stones around it, possibly to create the appearance of an underground great serpent breaking through. It's possible they saw this entire small ridge this way, as evoking the form of a great serpent. This end of the ridge could be the Serpent's head, lying down on the landscape. Around the ridge, we find a great deal of collapsed stone. If there was anything here like an old rock shelter, it's likely buried under additional collapse by now. I did find a curious, perched wing-shaped stone towards the southern end of the lower ridge. But again, with all the collapse here, it's hard to say this isn't natural. But I have my suspicions. This is all my own speculation, but I do wonder, could this be ancient stonework? There were curious stones nearby as well, a possible Manitou stone as you approach the ridge. There are also several glacial erratics on top of the ridge. This stone looks perched at first, but it's not. There's a gap between the boulder and the lower stone. Not perched, in this case. There's a lot to take in here, as you can tell. Still more for me to explore, so I'll be back. And just to be clear, I'm an independent investigator, and this video has nothing whatsoever to do with UVM or the University of Vermont. My thanks to UVM Forest Manager Jess Weichel for her help and interest, as well as the information and old photos and schematic. I'm Mike Luoma. Thank you for experiencing these mysterious earthworks, odd boulders, and more in UVM's Jericho Research Forest with me.